Welcome everyone to Let's Get Worming with Jasmin Thomas and Tonyi the Worm. Thank you for coming to the webinar today. My name is Zoe and I'm a health promotion volunteer at Enliven, Victoria. I would just like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. Enliven, Victoria acknowledges the people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways where we learn and grow together. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I'm calling in from the lands of the Yalukit William people of the Kulin Nation on Bunurong country. I welcome you all to write in the chat the traditional owners of the lands you're calling in from today, and also whether you're calling in from Cardinia Shire, or perhaps maybe you're calling in from a different area in the state. Please let us know. Everyone's welcome to join us in today's webinar. Just some housekeeping before we start. This session is being recorded, so it's lovely to see faces while we're presenting, but if for any reason, privacy reasons or anything, you prefer not to show your face, feel free to turn your camera off. You can also change the name that's displayed to everyone. So to do that, open the participants window, find your name, click more, and then you can rename it from there. We also kindly ask that you keep yourself on mute while presenters are speaking. If you've got any questions along the way, please pop them in the chat and there will be some time for Jasmin to get to them at the end. So just for some background, today's webinar is brought to you by Enliven Victoria and our Food from Home initiative. We would also like to give special thanks to Cardinia Shire for their funding support for today's webinar. Enliven Victoria is a not-for-profit that works across Melbourne's southeast to improve community-level health and social wellbeing. As part of Enliven's work, we have a community-based social marketing campaign called Food from Home, which aims to promote the health and climate co-benefits of edible gardening. We do this through several activities such as readily available resources and events like this one today. Food from Home has a vision of a resilient, healthy and food-secure future for all households and communities across Melbourne's southeast. To find out more, we have a website, Instagram and Facebook page. You can find all the details here on screen. I am now excited to introduce our presenter today, Jasmin Thomas. Jasmin Thomas is an avid home and community gardener who cares deeply for life, both above and within soil. Jasmin has created an engaging worm farm learning experience for children aged 3 to 7, starring Tonyi the Worm. Tonyi's a unique educational composting worm. Tonyi helps children identify what waste products can be diverted from landfill to instead feed the worms in a worm farm. Jasmin and her family are currently on a 12-month tour of Australia, sharing Tonyi the Worm sessions with groups in regional areas. Today, Jasmin and Tonyi will take us through the do's and don'ts of worm farming and will teach us how to set up a worm farm at home. Without further delay, I'll pass it over to you, Jasmin.
Thank you so much, Zoe. I really loved your introduction and I really love learning of the wonderful community connecting and upskilling projects that are happening in Melbourne, and yeah, Enliven and your Food from Home initiative is just wonderful, and I know that's kind of what has really led me to feel a deep connection to gardening is through, you know, being able to learn through different workshops that councils and groups like yourself do allow residents to get involved with. So keep up the good work, and yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to share my fun and interactive mate, Tonyi, and yeah, really great to be here with everyone this morning. We are joining you from the lands of the Wormi people, which is just north of, excuse me, just north of Newcastle, New South Wales. As Zoe mentioned, we're on a bit of a road trip at the moment in a caravan with my 2 young ones. I'm a mother of 2, and Ellie and Joe are 6 and 8. And we're having the time of our lives, just sharing our worm farm learning experiences with groups throughout different parts of Australia. So we've just begun. And yeah, it's really lovely to be connecting with a lot of, I think, Melbourners here this morning. So good morning to you down there. And I would love to invite everyone to pop in their names in the chat and any ages of the children that are joining today as well, and who the traditional custodians of the lands, as Zoe invited you to do also. I'd love to just find out where we're all joining from, which is just pretty cool how Zoom can allow us to do that. I do love the in-person experiences, but you know, this is saving a lot of energy in car fuel as well, isn't it? So win-win. So I have a real passion for soil, juicy soil, and I feel like from learning about how we can feed soil life, I have had just almost a shift in appreciation of all life on planet Earth. I did a course that was about building soil as a lasagna layering. So it was just about using materials that we have, you know, in our neighbourhood, and that's how I built one of my first garden beds. And a few months later, it was like lifting, you know, the blanket on this wonderful world of life, and I could just see there was the vitality in the plants that I, you know, was happy in sharing my time with in the garden. So I knew that the life within the soil was nourishing the life above the soil. And we gave, you know, we said thanks as we went and picked through our garden, and it was just more than just food. As you know, if you're growing food at home, it's more than just what ends up on your plate or what, you know, brings the bees. It's just a really beautiful experience, soul nourishing. So yeah, if you haven't tried worm farming, we're going to have a bit of an intro today, and I would love to introduce my friend Tonyi the Worm. Would you like to say hello to Tony? Hi, Tony. Tonyi the Worm is a composting worm. There's thousands of different types of worms. So composting worms are incredible little creatures who have an amazing appetite. So the ones that we can often find from worm breeders or even hardware store, they are the ones that have been in the natural environment, been living amongst the forest floor over in Europe. And they live in the decaying matter. And we'll talk about that in a little while, but they eat things that have, you know, fallen from the top of the forest or have been living amongst the forest floor. So when we're working with them in a worm farm environment, we're going to be having them in some kind of container. So I've just got a little mini worm farm here, but you might have seen something like this in your kindergarten or in, you know, along the side of the road. Sometimes people have given up and go, I don't know how to work this thing. So that's a worm farm, but they can look so many different ways. And this is the container that instead of them living amongst the forest floor, we can have them living in a special container. But we do need to obviously treat them as though they are living in this container, but also need to replicate their home environment. And that's kind of how I would like to think about this session this morning, is how we can start thinking how worms think and what they like and how they like to live, so that we can be good caretakers and worm farmers. So Tonyi the Worm here is a worm who is an electronic worm, and Tony's mates live as worms in these worm farms here. So I'm going to invite you to play a bit of a game with Tonyi the Worm this morning, and you can use the chat section. And yeah, we're going to have 12 of these special food cards that we're going to feed Tonyi. So Tonyi is electronic, and if this picture on the food card here, can you see what that is? So that's eggshells. So a lot of the stuff that composting worms can eat and we feed into a worm farm is stuff that we can be saving from putting in the rubbish bin and putting it out on the side of the road. So what happens to our rubbish when we put it out on the side of the road every week? Can you tell me what happens to our rubbish when it's sitting in the rubbish bin? Who comes along and grabs it every week? A big truck comes along and our bins get lifted and all the contents tipped into a truck. And that smelly truck can continue on its way through our neighbourhoods and off to the tip, where our waste is all going to be piling up with everyone else in our community. And that is a waste if we allow that big pile of rubbish to get too high and too big. And also what happens in the rubbish tip is the pollution can go up into the air and create air pollution and also leach into the soil. There's other types of food scrap collection, and that also will be using a truck to be collected, and yeah, it's processed. I haven't actually seen how it's processed yet, but what we're doing by putting those rubbish on the side of the road is we're pretty much just giving away things that we can be feeding our soil in the garden with. And when we can realise what things are okay to save to worms in a worm farm, that's when we can really connect with our waste and not think of it as waste. We can start thinking it as like a super ingredient that we can feed our garden with. So something like eggshells, for example, if that's okay for us to save from the rubbish bin and instead keep for the worm farm, this is what Tony will say. Is eggshells okay for worm farms, Tony? Did you see that? So that means, yes, eggshells can be saved from our bin, and we're going to feed them to worms instead. So I'm going to keep this one in my little pretend rubbish bin here, and we can all play along. So if we're going to go on this board here, we've got lots of different colours. I'm going to ask you to choose one of these colours here, and then you can play along by guessing yes or no. If you think Tony's going to say yes to whatever the card is, you can add an emoji in the chat, which is green. So you might want to do a green love heart, or I don't know what else is green, like I think a snake maybe, or something else green in your emoji selection. That can be your marker for, I think Tony's going to say yes. And if you think worms shouldn't be eating that food that's on the food card, you can put a red emoji in, okay? So if you want to go and get ready to do that, and I'm going to ask, what would you like, which colour here would you like me to choose for Tony first on the board? Okay, I'm going to say purple first. So what's under purple? All righty. So this picture is cheese. So do we think cheese should be fed to worms in a worm farm? Okay, so if you think Tony's going to say yes to cheese, you can put in your green emoji. And if you think Tony's going to say no, I don't think worms should be fed cheese in a worm farm, you can add a red emoji, okay? All right, you're putting your answers in. So if Tony doesn't have a response, then that means no, okay? So we're going to put that in the bins over here. All right, so Tony, can we feed cheese to worms in a worm farm? Oh, I can see one green, got a yes coming in. Okay, what do you think, Tony? Oh, that was a no from Tony this time. So we're going to just feed our worms their favourite food because they're going to be living in their small little worm farm. We want to make things that they can start eating straight away, and something like cheese, they might get to eventually, but because they've only got a small home, we want them to be eating things and make sure that their home environment is as they like it. So we're going to put cheese here in the rubbish bin, but I'm going to also say rubbish bin, or if you've heard of a bokashi bin, I'm not going to talk about that much today, but if you've heard of a bokashi bin, anything I'm going to be putting in that end bin today can also be put in a bokashi bin, which is another way of retaining the nutrients from our waste and keep them in your property and feeding to your garden. So bokashi bin or general waste for our cheese. Okay, what colour would you like me to feed Tony next? What have we got here? Magenta, love that. Okay, we have a tomato, which is a fruit, isn't it? I've got my banana skin here. Do you think worms would eat banana skins in a composting worm farm? Do you think green emoji yes, or do you think red emoji no? What do you think Tony's going to say? All right, let me get my fruit card out. And Tony, will worms in a worm farm eat fruit scraps? Let's ask Tony. Yeah, there was a few people who said yes, so good on you, great guessing. And do you know that we might have a few fruit scraps left over from our morning tea? Do you feel like we're going to add our scraps in like in big chunky pieces, or do you think it's better to chop our scraps into smaller pieces. What do you think? Do you think we're going to chop them up? Yes, that's right. We're going to chop up our scraps because the more surface area or the more edges on our scraps, that's where all the bacteria is going to start growing, and that's what the worms are going to eat. So you can do them a favour by chopping them up small. I even know some people who blend their scraps, and that's even smaller pieces than chop them up small. So we're going to put our fruit scraps in our worm tub. And this bin here, so we're going to save our scraps for our worm farm when we set up our worm farm in a little while. Okay, thank you very much. All right, who would like to choose the next colour that we're going to have a look underneath? Got any guesses coming through? What is that? Green. All right, cool. Let's go green. The big one. Ooh, okay. There, Mr. Red. Okay. We have onion. Okay, here comes the clue with this one. Do I have an onion? I don't have an onion, sorry. Onion, does that make your eyes water a little bit when you're chopping it up on the chopping board? The clue with this one, okay, worms, they breathe. So everyone take a breath in and out. They breathe through their skin. So if we're going to have our worm farm environment that is perfect for their gentle skin, do you feel like something like an onion that's going to be a bit zingy for our eyes? Maybe that would be a little bit unsettling for their skin as well. Do we want a lot of onion going in our worm farm? Let's ask Tony. You can guess along. We've got a red there. Fantastic. Okay, we're going to ask Tony. You ready? Onions. Are they okay to add to your worm farm, Tony? Well, that was another no from Tony. Again, if we've only got a small little container for our worm farm, for our little worm friends. So we want to feed them things that are absolutely going to be just in creating a really nice environment for them, and also with the acidity and the pH level, we don't want to add two things that are going to throw off their environment. So if we had a really huge worm farm or a big, big compost section, things that go in bits and small pieces, that would be okay. But something like onions in a small worm farm at home, I'm going to say, and Tony's already said, just keep them out, okay? So we're going to keep that for our bin or our bokashi bin. Okie doke. What colour are we going to unveil next? What have we got there? Blue. Okie dokie. We kind of already asked Tony this one. Eggshells. Let's find these eggshells of ours. So my friend Amy, she made some beautiful little frittatas this morning. We have some eggshells, and do you think worms would eat eggshells, or do you think we need to put them in the bin? Oh, we've got a few greens. Okay, I'm going to ask Tony. Here's our clue. Worms, they don't have teeth. So what they do with their food is they suck their food in with their strong lips, and in their gives it a little pillow in their throat. There's little stones that grind up their food into a paste. So do you feel like eggshells might be kind of like little stones that could grind up food and allow the food to go through their little bodies? Let's ask Tony. Tony, is eggshell okay to be fed into a worm farm? Yes, we did ask Tony that, but just double checking. Eggshells are okay for worms, and how cool is that? No teeth. So with their strong lips, and if we're going to really help our little worm friends, we can crush our eggshells and make them into small pieces. I find in my worm farm, there's still some chunky bits of eggshell even after a while. I don't mind that in my garden. I just feel like, that's just a little resemblance of what that Becky we had one day a few months ago. But some people like to blend up their eggshells nice and small into like a dust and feed that in. And obviously that's going to be just like the grit that can be used to pulverize the food that we feed them. So eggshells, yes. All right, which colour shall we choose next, everyone? Got a few left. There might be a few interesting, I might go pink, that's where I was heading to. Okay. Hair. Who has hair in the hairbrush, in the drain, in random places? You might find hair and think, surely that's just going to go in the bin. Or will we be able to feed it to worms in a worm farm? So we've got a green yes. Let's ask Tony. We've got a yes. Awesome. Okay, I think we might have some worm friends in the crowd because we've got some pretty good responses so far. So hair, Tony. Can we feed our hair, human hair, to worms in a worm farm? Ooh. Oh, thank goodness. Tony said yes after a bit of prompting. So we're going to save our hair and feed it to our worms in the worm farm. So next time you're sitting in the hairdresser chair, and I always look at all what's on the ground, I'm going to take that home and give it to our worm friends. And you can think of all the nutrients that are in our hair. Well, once it goes through a worm's body, that's going to be superfood for our plants in the garden. So I'm going to pop hair in the worm tub. And actually, I didn't put the eggshells in there either. It's going to go in our worm. So we're saving quite a few things from going off the tip. So well done, everyone. Okie doke, what colour should we go for next? I'm going to go for orange. Oh, here's our little friend Jedi, who's our border collie. I laminated some of her hair. And do you think animal fur is okay? So yeah, we just went to the barber or went to the hairdresser and we got our hair. What about if we're going to go to the chook shed and go and collect some feathers, or if we're going to give our friends at home a brush? Do you think something like animal fur can go in the worm farm? You think that's kind of similar to human hair? Let's ask Tony. We get some yeses. Okay, Tony, animal fur or feather? Is that okay? Aha, cool. Another thing we can save from going into the landfill, and we're going to be feeding that to the soil with thanks to the worms. So start collecting your animal fur, everyone. And I think it's just a nice way to, you know, our friends in our life, we can, in our hair, it's a nice way to gift it on and not let it go to waste. Okie doke. What colour are we up for next? I think we've got a few kind of similar colours here, don't we? So I'll be interested to see if anyone wants to give us a nudge towards one. Let's go to yellow. Oh, hang on, what have we got here? Red. Okay. Ooh. Sunday morning cup of tea. Do you feel like a tea bag is something that a composting worm will eat? Yes or no? Find our tea bag card. Okay. So we've got tea bag. We're going to ask Tony, is that okay for worms? Green emoji. What do you say, Tony? Ah, cool. Go Tony and go worms. We're going to save our tea bags, and or also might have some tea leaves or flowers from a brew. You can add that straight into your worm farm. So I have had a little Google search, and apparently some companies are using synthetic fibres for the sheath of the tea bag, and also I noticed some of the tags kind of a bit plastic printed. So I feel like maybe you can do a search and see whether the tea brand that you use is something that is a plant dye for the print, or you know, if it's a natural fibre for the tea bag. But yeah, those are the kind of things we need to take into consideration when we're saving things, because they are going to end up in our soil eventually, and obviously go through our worm friends as well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 left. Shall I start at the top? Here we go. So we've got a cheeky little carrot here. So I've got some lettuce leaves left over. Do you think lettuce, or, you know, veggie scraps, something that we have a lot of probably in a healthy, home. Often we try and, make nice salads, but sometimes you're going to have peelings or what else can you have? Pips from pumpkin, all different types of vegetables. Do you feel like those kind of scraps can go to worms in a worm farm? Yes, green emoji or red? What do you think Tony's going to say? All right, Tony, veggie scraps. Is that okay for worms to eat? Let's ask Tony. Yes, definitely. So I find that's quite a big component of the scraps that I feed my worm farm. So there's actually flies. Did you just see that little blackout? There's a fly zooming around my iPad right now. That's so funny. Hope they're entertaining you as well. So veggie scraps, we're going to save those. Again, are we going to add our veggie scraps in big chunkies, or do you feel like we're going to chop our scraps into small pieces so that the bacteria can grow on it faster and the worms can eat it faster with their no teeth, remember? Yeah, we're going to chop it up nice and small. So do your friends a favour. And what have we got next? Okay, this I'm going to say is beige. And we've got meat under this one. So I've got a pretend chicken bone here. So do you feel like meat is okay for worms to eat in a worm farm? Or do you feel like there might be some other friends that might come along? Ones that might even eat through plastic when they're in high numbers? Yes, rodents, so mice and rats. Do you feel like feeding meat into a worm farm is a good idea to attract mice and rats? Or, you might not have them in your area, so it might not be such an issue, but it might create a smell otherwise. So do you think Tony's going to say, yeah, you can feed meat into your worm farm? Or do you think Tony's going to say no? What do you reckon? We'll ask Tony. Tony, should we be saving meat for our worm farm? Nah, we're gonna save our meat and either give it back to the landfill, or we can feed it to our bokashi bin. Okay, so we don't want extra smells. Meat can go quite rancid, and often it's oily as well. So if we're thinking back to our friend's gentle skin, we don't want oil or salt to be in our worm farm because that will affect their skin because they're mostly made up of water. So if we're going to have something that's oily and affecting their skin like meat can, or attracting rats and mice, just better to keep it out. Okay, we have two more. I'm wondering what's under there because it's 3 cards. We have oranges. Okay, so citrus fruit. Again, we're on that same tangent about caring for their skin. So oranges, I know when I've peeled them, sometimes they zing me in the eye, or lemons, obviously quite acidic. So do you think we should be feeding our citrus to worms in a worm farm, or do you think Tony's going to say no to that? Okay, so Tony, should we be saving worms orange peel and lemon peel? No, Tony said no. Again, in small areas like their worm farm, we're going to just feed them the food that they can consume and keeps their environment just as they like it. Something like too much citrus will start tilting the acidity of the worm farm, and it just takes a little while longer to break down as well. So a little bit in there is okay, but as a general rule, I would keep citrus out of your worm farm. So, but yes to bokashi, and yes to landfill, obviously, where it's going at the moment for some. Rightio, we are the number 12 card, and we have here coffee. So, who loves a good cup of coffee? You might have instant, you might have beans that you grind, or you might have ground coffee. So, we've got a yes straight up, yes. Okay, so we can ask Tony, are coffee grounds okay for worms to eat in a worm farm, Tony? Tony's going to say yes. So yeah, we can even just add that straight into our garden, but we can add our coffee grounds into the worm farm. And yeah, I like adding my coffee in there because that's a daily thing for me. And yeah, I also add the drippings in the tray from my coffee machine, and I pour that in, and that keeps the moisture level kind of nice and moist while I'm collecting the scraps as well. We'll talk about the conditions that worm farms like in a minute. Rightio, so ripped paper is the last card. I have some here, some damp newspaper here, because we're going to be maybe using that for the setup. So do you feel like, because I've got it ready, Tony's going to say yes. Oh, do you think ripped paper is okay for worms to eat? Let's ask Tony. Okay, Tony's going to say yes. Awesome. So we can save things like your envelopes that come in the mail, other things that might be toilet rolls or paper towel rolls. So that can go straight into your worm farm scrap bin as well. So ripped paper, you'll be really surprised at all the things that you can find, whether it's at school, whether it's at home, whether it's at your workplace. All these scraps are our everyday, in our everyday life. So I think, yeah, once you start seeing them everywhere, you realise that we've got everything we need to feed creatures like composting worms. So you might be interested in worm farming to have worm mates and, you know, have a colony of worms that you can connect with as a you know, animals at home. But a lot of you might be interested to learn how you can nourish your soil, because what happens to our scraps in a worm farm is quite magical. So I might just show you. I often just have a tub like this at home for my collection scraps. So I know there's some pretty funky tins out there that you can collect your compostables in. I just find that these ones are really easy to give a nice warm wash, and you know, they fill up probably every couple of days, which I think is quite a nice rotation for your scraps to be fed into the worm farm. You'll notice there is a tight fitting lid. I've noticed in Queensland that there are soldier flies that, if you allow them, they will move into your worm farm, and I think they live quite harmoniously with the composting worms that are in there. But they eat a lot of the scraps, and then I'm not sure whether you get as many castings. So it's a tight fitting lid, obviously keeps the smells out as well. But if you're feeding every couple of days to your worm farm, then smells aren't really an issue. Summer can be, you know, a little different story. But so let's have a look at all the things that we save from going to the bin. Quite a few in our little tub here. So fantastic. And we've just got the 4 things here. So we've got the meat, the citrus, the onion, and the cheese. You could probably add bread into that as well. So, yeah, any food that will be attracting the rodents and that you can put in your bokashi bin. Yes, you can add to the bokashi bin, which is really awesome. I haven't really mastered that yet. I've done a couple of loads, and I believe that it's adding nutrition to the garden right now while we're away. But I haven't really looked into the ins and outs of bokashi enough. So I might be an expert out there who can teach us. So let's go ahead and think about how we can use all those scraps that we save and set up a worm farm now. So our worm farm, like I said, they can look a lot of different ways. And I feel like my priority is always to find a secondhand one, because that's already made. And yeah, I just feel like there's enough out there already for everyone who's interested. And if not, you can repurpose things. I've got some details on the last page of my website, which is, I really enjoy making DIY worm farms and in-ground worm towers. So if you're interested in that, I can add some details in a moment. Let me just go grab a box. This is a bit higher. But yeah, DIY. But if you're going to go and buy one, there are lots of different options out there. And this is one I got from the local hardware store the other day. I thought it might be a good size for the caravan, but my husband doesn't know I'm planning on bringing a worm farm just yet. Okay, so let's go back to where our composting worm friends live in their natural environment. So we're going back to the forest in Europe, okay, and we're thinking about the tall trees and the beautiful foliage that might, you know, fall gently when it's time to fall to the ground. Might be a strong wind, so some more leaves fall down, you know, more regularly. But accumulating around the roots of these trees are lots of different things that are being returned back to the soil in their natural way. So in decaying organic matter is how some say it. But yeah, we might be having like leaves and some sticks, some bark. There might be little beetles crawling through, and ants, little creatures that might have spend the last days of their life. The little dead bodies might be lying there. And we might have some birds coming and scratching around. So this is the environment that our composting worms were originally found. So if we're going to try and think about how we can care for them as they are in nature, which I feel like is how we can be caring for them responsibly, and we can recreate a small kind of environment similar to that in this container here. So a lot of the time you'll see your worm farm, or not your worm farm, a worm farm, which is a tiered one, and there's a bottom base bit here. Sometimes they've got quite long legs, and they've often got a tap here. So this bottom section here is kind of like the catchment tray, and you always keep the tap open with a small bucket underneath to catch whatever comes through. You don't want any liquid that's falling through your worm farm to be building back up through the top layers where your worms are going to be living. But no worms live in this bottom level here. So we're going to just keep that empty. This one actually has a drip tray and a catchment tray at the bottom, like this. But I haven't used this one yet, so I don't know. You might, yeah, it might work for you. I haven't tried it yet. All right, cool. So this is the first layer. So think of this as their kind of first living quarters, and this is going to be their little forest floor area. Okay, so you'll notice that there's some holes at the bottom here. So that's going to allow any liquid that needs to drop through back down to the base catchment area here. That is big enough for worms to get through. So I sometimes find worms in the bottom tray. That's kind of something you do as a maintenance thing. You can kind of just rinse them out and then pour them back through one of the trays, and you kind of just catch the goodness again. So let's start off with something that might be kind of similar to a leaf that has fallen from our tree. We've got some beautiful wet newspaper here. So this is considered bedding. And when it comes to a worm farm, what you need is bedding, a nice dark environment and moist environment, because it, again, like the forest floor, is dark and moist. And you need your worms and you need food. So we've really got everything we need right here. So our bedding, I'm going to, well, my friends have already helped me scrunch it up like so. There's lots of air pockets in there, and air is another big thing, like that bird scratching around, creating aeration, a really important thing in our worm farm. So instead of just layering things like a pancake, scrunch things up, a really fun way to get involved as well, and let them soak for about 5 minutes. And this is beautiful, a beautiful moisture level. So if I was to squeeze it, a little few drips would come out. A lot of people recommend making your worm farm as moist as a wrung wet sponge. So if I was to kind of squeeze it like so, a couple of drops might come out, maybe not. But that is, yeah, that's how you want it, okay? So we're going to just layer some beautiful bedding here. I haven't soaked anything but cardboard, newspaper, but I could have also added some corrugated brown cardboard like this. So if I got a bit closer, you could see it's like those little zigzag layers in there. Again, the air pockets. So I could soak that, which I might do, and just add it at the end. And also our toilet rolls. So you're going to rip it up nice and small, add lots of surface area for the bacteria to start growing. And this bedding is actually rich in carbon. And there's a bit of a list that you don't really need to think about too much, but as you're collecting things in your life, you probably have some things that are rich in carbon, others that are going to be rich in nitrogen. And having a balance of both and a variety of both lists of ingredients is really what it's going to make your worm farm really great. Because, yes, the mixture of ingredients with all the nutrients going in is going to give you a nice variety of nutrients that are be coming out via your worm castings. Okay, so we've got our bedding going in. Next, we're going to add some of the scraps. So I'm just going to add some of my lettuce, some of these banana skins here, eggshells, crush them up nice and small. Even found a cardboard bread tag. I think it's fantastic that companies are going that way now. So I'm going to soak that a little bit as well. And when we're starting off, you don't want to overfeed your worm farm. So, you know, a couple of handfuls of scraps is a good way to get started. And look, I feel like 1,000 worms is probably a good number to get started. And I'd always suggest going to a local breeder because they are always the passionate ones who love their worms and have a lot of advice. And yeah, I've felt a little bit disappointed sometimes buying worms from stores because I feel like there's not that amount in there. So connect with your community, put a little post out, I'm starting a worm farm, and just see who's out there because yeah, worms multiply. They do. And so yeah, and it's really great to meet who else is a worm lover in your community. So in this little bundle here, I'm going to get closer because they're just too gorgeous not to share. We have some composting worms, and these we have, I think, 3 different types. I had a look on their website, so I had to buy these from a store, and their website said they were red wrigglers, reds, and blue Indian. Indian blues actually. So composting worms, they are the surface dwelling worms. So like, you know, in the forest floor, just in the top level there. So there are other types of worms that come from deep, deep down, and they bring the food down and burrow. These ones are living in the top soil there, in the leaf litter. So that's why we're going to add them here. And they have an amazing appetite. So I haven't weighed their food, but I have, I believe they can eat about half their body weight to their whole body weight in food daily. So that's why we work together with these worms, because of their appetite. And they will wait for things to start getting brown and getting a little bit funky. They're going to ingest, use the gizzard grinding action in the gizzard area, and goes through their body. And there's 3 different types of enzymes that are added that break down all the structure from a plant, in a leaf or bark or whatever. It's quite amazing, actually. So when it comes out the other end is what we gardeners love, and it's called castings. So if anyone out there hasn't said the word casting before, I invite you to say it now. Castings. Worm castings are just so rich in nutrition and is what communicates to our plants. So there's a lot of nutrition in our soil, and soil is actually, you know, people consider it as being just like this static kind of medium, and it's not. It's just so full of life, and all the nutrition that we're adding as our scraps will end up in our soil by going through that digestive tract of our worms. And castings is something that we all want to have in our lives. So okay, we've got our bedding, we've got our scraps, we've got our beautiful worm friends, and I'm going to pop the lid on. So I don't feel like we need another layer just yet. The lid's going to keep things nice and dark, like in the forest floor. Give it a couple of weeks, and then you can give another feeding. I feel like you want to see your worms eating what you fed them last time when you go to feed them again. They take a little while to settle in, But once they started settling in, they will start breeding, and they breed quite regularly, and they are hermaphrodite as well. So every worm in there is both male and female. And so once they have settled in, they will start having their babies with one another and lay their cocoons. And then within a few weeks, their babies will be hatching from the cocoons. And then I think they're about 3 months old when they can start reproducing themselves. So once you're setting a beautiful environment for them, things just happen in there. And so, yeah, you can see how you can gift someone some composting worms when you feel like your colony is thriving. So it's a nice way to give forwards. So let's wait for this to be built up a little bit. So you might come back in a couple of weeks and there's a few more scraps added. And, you know, then it might be every few days when you're adding things. And you might want to just kind of, some people kind of feed in one pocket at a time, and you can observe what's going on from last time. I think it's really quite fascinating. It's really great for the kids to get involved and see, oh, look, there's that banana peel. Look at it. You know, they're loving that. Or, you know, just get to know your worms. When your scraps are kind of building up to, you know, close to the lid, you can start thinking about adding your next layer. Okay, so let's go and do that now. So maybe we're a month into this one because it's only small. And then I'm going to pop this layer on here. And so again, bottom's empty. Second one's got our worm friends and our bedding and our scraps. And this is going to be the new setup for more bedding. So I'm just going to add some more here and some more scraps. And then our worm friends from the first feeding level here are going to be able to move up when they sense that there is food in this next area. So you don't need to, you know, move them up or anything. They're just going to move through those holes, and that's their inclination, is to keep finding the food. So that's, you know, that's why they don't often go down unless they're flooded out. They're going to keep moving up to find the new food. And they've just got amazing senses. They've got sensory on their top of their head, and different worms are, you know, attracted to different things. But most of the time, yeah, they go and source out food and wait for things to be ready. So yeah, it's really quite amazing when you get watching and observing. It's really cool. So we've said this for maybe a few weeks, or, you know, you just have to keep an eye on things. But this first level here, that might be starting to get processed a lot more and not resemble any of the scraps that you fed it. So if it's, you know, starting to look like kind of just darkish scraps, and all of a sudden you're going to have your whole tray full of worm castings, and they just look like beautiful black soil. And if you look nice and close, it's quite bally. This is the colour that you're looking for. So it's just beautiful black. It's like compost. If you ever finished compost before, but it's just beautiful and smells like rich earth. And when your whole tray is looking like that, it's time to harvest the casting. And that means just taking the whole tray off, and then we'll replace it with the one that was just above it. And that's now the one that's kind of getting worked on by the worms that have moved up. And all the black castings that are in here probably still have quite a few worms. That is a bit of a pickle that you can sometimes, like, you have to lay out a tarp, and you can kind of make them into little pyramids. And then they always want to go to the darkest place. So obviously they're going to burrow into the center area, and then you can kind of just shift away the edging and then collect that in a small bucket and then go and feed into your garden. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But harvesting your castings, you can do, yeah, just do it in a shady place, because any UV is going to start affecting and breaking, you know, killing off some of the life that's in your castings. So do that in a shady spot. My last kind of line of defense is to get a strainer for any of the worms that are left, and I just kind of pour the hose through it and then collect any of the worms left over and then put them back in the worm farm. So try not to put the composting worms in the soil. If they get in there, I believe if there's enough kind of organic matter and mulch on top, then there could be a life for them. But yeah, maybe not. Okay, so there might be some questions about that setup, but I can answer that as well. So you just kind of keep rotating your trays as you empty them. That's the new top one, and then always keep them in a shady, dark place. So I have my worm farm. I've got a worm bathtub, and I have that in the back of my south wall of my house, and that never gets done because we want our worms to, even in summer, we need to add some wet stuff to the top of our worm farm. So you might want to, that's what I didn't mention, you might want to add a blanket to the top of your worm farm, and that will kind of insulate it, and you can keep that moist. So you just kind of, you don't really want to run your hose over it too much, because anything that's running through the leachate, if it's not from castings, it's not actually finished yet. So you can pour any liquid that comes through, you can pour that back through the top of your worm farm until that smells like earthy earth as well. So, but yeah, if you've got castings there, you can, but I often find that you don't really have a lot of liquid that comes through if conditions are right in your worm farm. So if you're collecting in your tub, you know, your envelopes and your paper towel roll holders and stuff like that, when you add your coffee liquid or your cup of tea that you haven't quite finished, that kind of keeps things moist, and that's enough when I go and add it. But yeah, again, try and keep it like the wrung sponge. Okay, I'm just going to check the time. Oh my goodness, it's quite late. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to quickly mention about feeding your castings into the garden. So you can either make like a little mixture with your castings so that it's like a bit of a slurry, and then you can pour that through your garden. Add it to your soil when it's already wet, because yeah, that can connect with the soil up there already. And I'd also kind of try and add some mulch over top so that it's yeah, it's protected from the sun, and yeah, just feel like you've gone through all that effort, and the worms have too. So let's keep building the soil above. And also, yeah, you might have the castings themselves. You might want to just directly add. You only need about a teaspoon. You might want to just go and give it to all the plants and just say thank you, or, you know, just check in on them. And, you know, it's really lovely to feel like your scraps can then connect with the plants. And yeah, it's just a really lovely circular way to treat our gardens and our waste that's coming in, thing that's coming into our life and going out of our life. If you just kind of, yeah, observe it a bit and give it a bit of appreciation, I feel like it goes a long way. So did we want to go to questions now? Because I feel like, yeah, I didn't realise it was so late. So hopefully that's okay for everyone. And before we, yeah, I'd like to just say thank you as well for everyone caring enough to want to learn about worm farming. And I think it's wonderful when, yeah, we can all kind of learn from one another. And if there's any questions, yeah, let's have them. And you're also welcome to give me a call or email, or yeah, just happy to chat worms anytime. So.
Thank you so much, Jasmin and Tony, for such a wonderful session. And thank you everyone for coming along and participating as well. Just before we jump to questions, I'd like to mention that Cardinia Shire has a waste rebate as well, where you can claim money back on your worm farm. So feel free to jump on the Cardinia Shire website. You can Google waste rebate, and there's all these rules and the application form there as well, which is pretty handy. And George has just linked it in the chat for us. There was a question from Sarita. Jasmin, if you've got a bit of time, I know we're running a bit short. She's just asked, what is the white pest, not the baby worms, that appear to be in harmony existence with earthworms? Should I get rid of them, and how to do that?
Yes, I was asked about that recently, because I didn't really notice them in my worm farm. I think are they the larvae or the fly, Serena? Because I haven't actually worried about them. someone I spoke with the other day said that they put in bread. I think they said they soaked it. Might have been in milk, and it attracted any larvae that was in there, and they removed it that way. But yeah, I haven't. I feel like it's probably okay. Like it's, yeah, unless they're hatching into a colony of, you know, like there's maggots or anything like that. I feel like they sound like they're pretty harmless. But yeah, I wish I could see them. And yeah, but if they're kind of like little flies, there's often vinegar flies, which they're fine as well. And often if there's anything that's kind of hatching that feels, if you look into it, often people are suggesting to break the habit, not to break the habit, break the cycle by adding maybe like a hessian sac on top every few days, like kind of just turning the top bit over a little bit, because that might be where they're breeding. But I haven't really had any issues, but I do have a big worm farm, and I feel like everything kind of sorts itself out there. Sorry, I don't know if that really helps.
She's just said fly, so maybe that hessian
fly. Yeah, yeah. So I think maybe try the bread in a corner, and then remove whatever comes along. I'm not sure what you want to do with it, but if you wanted to take them out, but yeah, every few days you could probably just turn over the top level, and that might just be breaking the egg cycle, egg larvae fly cycle.
Perfect. Now we've just clicked over 11 a.m, so we might wrap it up there. But we'd really love some feedback on today's webinar as well. So George is going to link a survey in the chat. It'll also be emailed to you, but we'd really appreciate everyone to fill that out. It's very short and brief. But thank you again, everyone. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. It's absolutely beautiful here in Melbourne, if you're in Melbourne. So enjoy your mornings and your afternoons, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.